I want to start this with a quick disclaimer. The first time I did this service to my bike, I was not able to purchase the factory service manual from Kawasaki as it was back ordered. Even today, most of the special tools that are in that factory service manual are not available for purchase because this bike is very new. This is the method I've used to disassemble the forks, and I've had success with it. Hopefully it works for you. This is the right fork tube with preload adjustment. The first thing I'm going to do is cut this zip tie here. I use it to keep track of how much my fork is traveling so I can adjust the preload to make sure I get the best ride. I find the easiest way to work on forks at home is to use a soft jaw vise like this. I'll clamp my fork into there and then I'll get my tool to remove the top cap. Kawasaki doesn't make one for this bike, so to remove this top cap I have to use a large crescent wrench. Hopefully you've broken the top cap free on the bike. It makes it a lot easier, but if not, what you can do is get a strap wrench like this to hold your fork in place on the outer tube and then break the top cap free, which will be a little stiff. Once this top cap is loose, you can go ahead and take your adjustable wrench here and spin it off all the way. It usually just takes a little bit to start spinning this, and then once it's moving good, you can do it by hand. Once this is all the way off, the outer tube is going to drop down and expose our fork internals. Because I forgot to reduce the preload before working on this, I'm just unscrewing it now with a 6mm Allen. Once that's done, I'm going to take these two wrenches, a 17 and an 18mm, and I'm going to use them to remove the top cap of the fork tube. It just takes a little bit of pressure to release them, and then the top cap unthreads from the rod assembly. When you're taking your parts off, put them on some paper towel because they are a little oily, and put them in order that you take them off in the direction you take them off so that you remember how to reassemble your unit. With the top cap removed, I'm going to remove this locking nut so that I can start getting at all of the rest of the internals. One of the most challenging parts of this fork removal is there's a little clip inside this seat here. The Kawasaki manual is not very good on this. It says to push down this and remove the clip however you can. There's really no special tool. I tend to use a couple of picks to try and pry this out, and it does take a while, so I'm just going to speed through that now. As you can see, it's a lot of messing around to get this clip off. It takes a couple tools to pry at it. There is a little hole cut in the spacer that you can kind of get in there and wiggle it out. This is probably the most frustrating part of the removal, but I've got it off now, and it did spring up with quite a bit of force, so just watch yourself here. I'm just going to move my stuff out of the way, and you can see here there is the clip right there that's really hard to get out, and this is like a retaining washer of some kind. There's a little groove right in the edge there that the clip locks into, and that's what keeps everything inside your fork. So you can now remove your spring that is tapered, so make sure you put it down the right way so you can put it back in the right way. We'll now remove this little piston assembly. Inside is some sort of dampening rod. There's a few more parts inside here, but they're kind of hard to get out. Magnet can pull them out. Not sure if they're all magnetic, but I'm just going to dump this out into my oil pan, and I'll use my fingers to catch anything that falls out of it. So there's the little end cap for that piston rod assembly, and then I'm going to pull out the entire preload spring for this side of the fork. This side of the fork is different than the other side, so don't be surprised if you did the other one first if this looks a little bit different. Now that everything's out from the inside of the fork, I've just left it upside down here and draining out all of the oil. Once I've got all of the oil out, I'm just going to take a little look in there, make sure I did get it all, and then we can start splitting the outer tube from the inner tube. Again, I'll use the soft jaw vise. I'll hold on to the outer tube with my fork oil bucket underneath. This is just to catch anything that dribbles out. So you have to take a little flat screwdriver or pick, remove the dust seal from the outer fork tube. It'll just pop off and slide up. Just be careful not to damage the bottom of your fork if you care. Inside there's a little lock spring or washer. You can take a little screwdriver or a couple of picks. This pops out pretty easily. Definitely a lot easier than the other one. I like to use two picks, so I kind of pick at it from both sides. I'll hold it up a little bit with this one pick tool, and then I'll just pop it off from the other side. This just helps make sure I don't damage anything. So it's going to slide up to the tube, and with that clip removed, now the fork seal can come out. This is the oil seal down in here, and on this tube, the way that you remove this, it's just pulling it apart. So it is going to have a little bit of stiction, so pound it fairly hard, and there you go. You've now separated your outer tube from your inner tube. At this point in time, everything's a little bit oily, so maybe get a paper towel and give it a little wipe down if you want. Our next step is we're going to remove these guide bushings that are inside the tube. These come off pretty easily. You just need a little flat screwdriver, and you'll find there's a slit in the bushing. So there's the little groove there. We take a flat screwdriver in there and just gently twist it open while pulling that bushing up. You're going to slide that up and over off the tube. Be careful not to scratch anything if you can, and wiggle that off. And again, set it down in the same order that you took it off at. I'm just taking a look here to see if there's any damage. These are brand new forks, so I don't expect to see anything, and there isn't. The next bushing that's going to come off just slides right up and over. That's pretty easy. Again, take a look, make sure there's no damage. The important part on this one's the inside. On the other one, it was the outside. So it's that gray material that you don't want scratched or damaged. So I'm just putting things in order here so I can remember. The next is a washer. This washer is cupped. What I mean by that is it does matter which side goes up. One side's going to be really flat with sharp edges. That's what I'm feeling here. And the other side is curved. It's really important to put them in the same order that they came off. In this case, it was the flat side went down towards the oil seal. So I'll put it on the paper towel the same way I want to put it in, so that when I pick it up, I just set it on. You can use whatever technique works for you. I've seen some guys label these with as well with a magic marker to make sure. Next is the oil seal. I'm not reusing these, so I can pry them off however, but on this particular fork, it's pretty sharp, the ridge where that bushing fit. So you might want to cover that in some black tape, saran wrap, fork seal bullet or something, so you don't damage your seal. We'll definitely have to do that on reinstall. I'll give this another wipe down with a paper towel, trying to get some more of that oil off. And then the dust seal. The dust seal I'm not really concerned about. Again, I'm replacing it, so we'll just pull it off. After a quick wipe down, this fork tube is now disassembled as far as you need to do fork seal service. You may need to remove the inner tube if you do some work on this later, but this has now got you ready for fork seals. So I'm just going to hang this upside down in my soft jaw vise for about 20 minutes, just to make sure every bit of oil that I can drains out of it. That way when I replace the oil, I know I'm getting as much new fresh oil as possible. While that's draining, just give everything a clean to make it easier to put back together. I like to clean everything really good, so I'm going to take some paper towel and push it inside the fork tube. A couple pieces usually works, and then I'll just get a long bar of some type, and I'm just going to use that to push that paper towel down through the inside of the tube, just in case there's any oil or debris in there. I just want to make sure I get everything out so that when I put these back together, they're as clean as I can get them. So that looks good. Everything's pretty clean in there, as you can see. So that is now all disassembled and ready for the next step. We'll move on to the other fork here. This is the left fork tube. I do have a mount on it here for a Graves steering stabilizer. You might not have that, but it's not going to interfere with this, so we're just going to leave it where it is. You can see here on the cap that there's no adjustment on this fork tube. I also have another zip tie here, so I'm just going to cut that off like I did on the other one. And really this part of the process is really the same as the other leg. So we're going to put this in our soft jaw vise, and we're going to take, let's get that out of the way. It kind of fell over. I've just got it sitting in the oil pan in case it drains a little more. So we're going to take our big crescent wrench again, or adjustable, and we're going to spin that fork cap off. It's already a little bit loose, so it's going to come off pretty easy. I'll drop the outer fork tube down, again exposing the internals, and this is where it's different on this model. There is no adjustment here, and everything from here it's similar, but it definitely is a harder fork tube I found to work on. So we need to slide down this rubber to expose the lock screw. This is some sort of bushing, I guess. So I'm going to get on there with my wrench. In this case, it's a 15 millimeter. And there's no place to put another wrench on this one, so I'm going to use my crescent wrench at the top of the cap. And I'm just going to break that free. And now I can spin off the top cap. Again, I'm going to put this on the clean paper towel on the other side, keeping it in order that things came off. Remove this locking nut like we did on the other side. So this is all pretty similar, hopefully to you by now. And I'll get this little rubber cap off the way. Now that I've got the cap off, I can see inside, and there's another one of those lock rings in here that we have to remove. So I'm going to try and take this lock ring out again. There is a little gap that you can see inside the inner fork tube, and you can kind of get a pick in there and pry at it a little bit. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is get this pick in there to pry out the lock washer like I did on the other side. But it's not moving at all, and that's because this fork is assembled differently. So I'll just try and push it down. Even with a socket pushing pretty hard, I can't move it down at all. So without relieving that pressure, I just can't get enough of a push to get this lock washer out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try removing the outer fork tube first, and that's going to expose the little gap there where I can take, hopefully, and get something in there to push this apart. So I'm going to take and flip this upside down, just like I did on the last fork. It's always good to have an oil pan nearby, just when you're working on forks, make sure nothing makes too much of a mess. Nothing seemed to come out of this one, and I think that's because once we get a little further in here, you'll see the internals are quite a bit different. So all the oil is sitting behind the valving inside a cylinder, and that's what was preventing me from getting access to that lock washer. So we'll go ahead and pull off the dust seal here, just like we did last time with a little flat screwdriver. With the dust seal removed, I was able to see that there's not the usual locking ring in there. Instead, there's a snap ring washer that's holding everything together. I guess that's because there's more pressure, so I'll get some snap ring pliers here. I found a pair that works pretty good, and we'll just kind of pull this snap ring out. It came out pretty easy once I found a good set of pliers to get on there and pull with. I had tried these other set that have are meant for an outer ring, but unfortunately the tips just weren't good enough and the ring kept snapping off. So now that that snap ring is out, there's nothing holding the oil seal in, so just like on the last side, I'm going to flip it over. But you want to be careful here when you start pulling it. You're going to expose these holes on the inner tube, and the oil is going to make a big mess. So get over your oil pan, and there you go. You can see it squirted all over. Get that initial oil out. Again, just trying to keep the mess down to a minimum here. So now I'll pound the ring out like I did last time. So this seemed to take a little bit more force than the other tube to split, but came apart fine. So we get this back in the vise to work on it. And you can see there's that little hole right at the top of the fork tube right there, where I'm hoping I can get a tool in to pick out that snap ring. So I'll remove this bushing just so I don't damage it. And I'm trying to get on there with this pick to see what I can do to move this, to get this snap ring out. And it's just not budging at all. No matter what I tried on this side, it was really tight to get out. What I've got here is a fork spring compressor that I own. So I'm going to take my tube out of the vise, and I'm going to put this fork spring compressor in there just so that it's easier to work on. And my plan at this point in time is to take and compress that little clip a bit using the fork spring compressor. Inside there's a valving, and if I push that down just a little bit to loosen up some of the pressure on that clip, hopefully I'm going to be able to pick that out. This does block the view of the camera. I apologize for that. So we're just going to put this in here. I got to remove the locking pin at the bottom just so I can get everything seated well into my fork spring compressor I'm going to take the socket that I was using before, set that on top. It sits just inside of the snap ring so that I can push just on the seat. And I'll try and crank that down. Like I said, I don't think it's going to take much, but a little pressure is going to go a long way here to relieve some of this challenge. All right, so we got this tightened in, and I was lucky that I was able to push that down just a smidge. I was right that putting a little downward pressure on that loosened things up enough that I could get the snap ring off. So if you don't have a fork spring compressor, you could try maybe tapping it down with a deep socket and a mallet or something. You just need to move that down just a little bit to relieve pressure on it. You can also try building your own fork spring compressor or whatever you need to get some pressure on that. So what I've done here is I've managed to get the pressure off. I opened up the snap ring. I wedged my pick in there so that the snap ring can't fall off. And now I just slide this little screwdriver around and popped right off. Made it a whole lot easier to work on it this way, to be honest with you. So I would probably do the other fork in the same style if I had to do this again. Remove the outer tube first and then work on it. It just was easier to get my tools in there. Now that we've got that snap ring out, I'm just going to remove the rest of my bushings. So there's another slide bushing, and now I'm going to remove the washer. Again, remember it's tapered, so pay attention to which side goes to where on that. Here's the oil seal. Again, it's the same as the other side. I'm not going to reuse it, so I'll pull it up over those ridges. It's probably damaging the seal, but it's getting thrown out anyways, so I don't really care. After the oil seal comes off, we're going to pull off this snap ring. You can see it's quite a bit different than the other side, and the dust boot. You can see here, there's that little piston or valve body inside there that's got everything stuck together. The way you remove that is you put the nut back on top of your rod, and what we're going to do is tighten the vise not onto the rod but just smaller than the nut so everything moves freely, and using like a slide hammer we're going to hold on to the bench a little bit and we're just going to pound this pretty hard and it's going to pop that off. I've done this once before on these forks and it worked pretty well, so I'll just give it a couple really strong pulls, and there you go, everything pops out. You can see that metal sleeve or cylinder, that's what was stuck inside. It's got a little seal on the bottom and it gets in there pretty good, so it takes a lot of work to get out. So now we can take everything back apart. We'll remove that internal piston. I'm not sure what that is, but I think it's some sort of valving thing. And now we're going to remove the actual piston itself on this rod. It's got your rebound spring on it. And down in the bottom is your preload spring, so I'm just going to dump this out into the oil pan to get access to that and pull it out. Once that's removed, you'll notice it's a lot smaller than the other one, but that's the last internal out of that fork. So now your forks are totally disassembled and you're ready to clean everything and put new seals back in it, new fluid, and then you're good to go. Hopefully you found this video helpful.